Welcome to an IEXIST podcast. Our entire mission can be summed up in one phrase: becoming all that we are. It is our belief that fulfillment doesn't come from changing into things you aren't, but rather from becoming everything that you already are. And ultimately, we're here to press and empower you to lead lives that are full of fulfillment. We've dedicated this specific podcast to the dream, not to having the dream or even talking about the dream, but to living the dream. The reality is that there's a stark difference between having a dream and manifesting one. Here you'll gain insight and wisdom keys directly from some of the water walkers of our generation, dream practitioners, those who have decided to tread paths where there were none, to step out into only what they could see. Come take a peek into the minds of some who, from within, create our world's most magnificent realities. I'm the creator and host, Brian Farr, and this is the Living the Dream podcast. All right, hello and welcome to the 19th episode of Living the Dream, the podcast. I am your host, Brian Farr. I'm happy to be your host, and I want to thank you. I appreciate you for tuning in today. Before we get started, I would like to invite you to partner with us on a monthly basis at patreon.com/Brian Farr. There you'll find different tiers with different amounts attached to each tier by which you can partner with us, again, on a monthly basis. That will continue to help push the podcast everywhere it needs to go. Also, you'll notice that by partnering with us on patreon.com, beyond everything that you're getting and contributing to concerning this podcast, there's also member-only benefits that come along with partnering with us. And those include a number of things such as bonus material, behind-the-scenes footage of other projects that I'm working on, discounts on future merch that'll be releasing soon, music, books, and much more. Just go to patreon.com, and that's patreon.com/BRYANPHARR. If this is helping you in any way, please consider partnering with us today. So moving right into our subject matter for today, I want to talk just a little bit longer about the necessity of producing, of bearing fruit, of taking progressive steps or action, and how vital it is to your success and fulfillment. Now, I don't really consider the accumulation of things without fulfillment success, but because so many people separate the two, we'll just say that it's vital to both. The way that I want to continue this conversation is to really emphasize the need to take actionable steps towards your goals in order to figure out who you are. Now, this may sound like a podcast that may be geared towards people who are just beginning to start to pursue or to live, manifest their dream. And that may be true, but there'll definitely be some information you'll want to catch even if you're midway your journey or maybe what you consider to be nearing the end. So I actually heard someone say earlier that one of the ways that many of us are taken advantage of in life, and I want you to follow me for a second, is that sometimes we come in contact with people who see potential in us, who can maybe through their life's experience have a little bit more insight about us than we do. And rather than giving us that insight, they'll use their insight on us, about us, to take advantage of us and use sometimes the skills we don't even realize are there in order to get their will done in the world, rather than to help you actually progress in life. And what they'll actually do is hide it from you as long as they can, so that they can get the most work out of you before you actually discover it yourself, and then soon realize that you may have been used the entire time. And this will be specifically for people who have potential beyond a certain space or beyond a certain place, beyond where you are, but you yourself in this moment don't even realize it. Here's what I want to say to everybody that's listening today. First of all, it's highly important to know who you are. The reason being that success, fulfillment is going to not just come from taking action. It's going to come from taking action in the proper direction. which means that progress, fulfillment, being fruitful, being productive, it's not about taking a bunch of actions. It's about taking actions in the right direction. And some of you have not gotten to the place to where you are taking steps in the right direction. And the more we get into this conversation, the more you're going to see how important it is that in the pursuit of any dream or the pursuit of the fulfillment of any dream, it's very important that you learn to get rid of the fear of failure. And that's because, and I'll go ahead and tell you, that it's going to take action to even know who you are so that you can start taking productive action towards your actual goal. All right, so I'm not going to confuse you. So let me say it this way. I'm sure that most of us, as a majority, have a lot of people we admire or that we potentially admire, right? There's many of us who could say, I admire somebody in TV and film, and another person in politics, another person who is a health practitioner, someone in the beauty industry, someone in other forms of entertainment, philanthropist, a lot of different areas that we can find at least one influence, somebody that we admire or would want to be like. If you're that person, and also as of now, your dream or the lifestyle you envision for yourself, the dream you want to manifest, is somewhat vague. And I'll describe to you what that looks like. It just may involve happiness, family, fun, security, as much as you can have. So that will be internal and external. Love, and probably the opportunity to give or be of help to humanity. That's all great, but it's very vague because it does not involve how you will get to that place. It'll probably bring back to your memory the days in grade school in which you were dreaming about what you should be one day. And then later on, right before college or during college, you were in a rush to still try to figure out the direction in which your life would go. The problem is that some of us were in such a rush, probably pressured by people around us and ourselves, that we ended up just landing on something that honestly isn't anything that fulfills us or is even getting us to the vague description of any dream that we had in the first place. So in order to truly live your dream, you need to know who you are so that you can know exactly what to do, exactly how to get there, exactly what's going to carry you there. Again, living the dream is not about just accumulating things. You want to be fulfilled. And in order to be fulfilled, you have to become everything that you are. Again, that's why that's the vision statement for I Exist, becoming all that we are. Because fulfillment can only come from a person blossoming, blooming into everything that they were meant to be, intended to be from the beginning. Believe it or not, I know you may not believe it, but you were placed in this world with intention. So what that means is that you have a role to fulfill. And the only way you'll feel fulfilled is for you to fulfill that role. I'm doing it now with what I'm doing and exploring many other ways that I can continue to do so. And as I brought up in the very beginning of this conversation, what knowing who you are does also is protect you from people who don't care about you being fulfilled and care about being on the most fulfilling path or the path to your dream, but want to use your potential, use your gifts, your talents, your latent abilities that you may not even realize are there, but are being activated in you doing work for someone else, again, that they're taking advantage of without really being concerned about your personal fulfillment. And I'm not even really going to say that they should be concerned about that, because most of us who have just decided to settle and take a job somewhere are really so low on the food chain, I'll say, that the person even above you also settled and are not going to be personally responsible for your fulfillment because they have not been personally responsible for their own. So this is something that you should not blame others for not caring or not pushing you into your purpose. It's something that you're going to have to take full responsibility for yourself. And that's also why this conversation will be important to you in order to bring out even elements such as that. Ultimately, your parents are not going to be responsible for it. Ultimately, your friends are not going to be responsible for it because you don't know where they are themselves. They may have settled just as much. And so their advice even may be something that's not long-term useful for your fulfillment, for your dream. So you have to become responsible for yourself first. So here's what we've established so far, that living your dream and living fulfilled requires productivity. It requires fruitfulness. And if you don't have a reference of what fruitfulness is, I would encourage you to listen to episode 18 to get a little bit more insight on that. But the dream, fulfillment, requires productivity. But productivity is not just action. Productivity is action guided in the right direction. So just to give you a quick example of that, if a house caught on fire, and let's say by the time the firefighters got to the scene, about half of the house was completely up in flames, but not completely destroyed. If the firemen hooked up all of their equipment really fast, got in formation and stance in order to turn the hose on so that they could put out the flames, but once they did it, they shot the neighboring house with the water, besides the one that was actually being burned. And they kept shooting it in that direction. And eventually, the entire house burns down. I'm quite sure that all of them and their boss would walk away from that situation saying that was a very unproductive day. Not only would people be sad, mad, and all of that, again, the day would have been considered in the most blatant way unproductive. It didn't matter how much action they took. They all suited up, jumped out of their comfortable positions, did just like you saw on TV growing up and may see to this day, slid down the pole, jumped on the fire truck, took a lot of action. And let's say that as firemen, what would have made them, of course, the most fulfilled that day, the way they would have been able to leave that position and say, man, this is the dream. This is what we've always wanted to do, save lives, help people keep as much of their property as possible. If that was the case and they shot the wrong house with water, none of them would walk away being fulfilled or, again, having accomplished anything, which means that they were highly unproductive. So in life, again, it's not just important that we take action, but that we take productive action, action guided in the right direction. If that water wanted to be fulfilled as water and help someone out, it would need to have been going in the right direction. So knowing who you are is what produces that guided action. If I know for a fact that I was born a doctor, I was born to master the art of healing people through the medical practice, I could now take guided action towards that fulfilling end goal, which is to get a medical degree, do all the studying I can, even on my own, never stop studying, never stop growing, harness and grow my craft, my skill, my talent. And then concerning that purpose-filled career, for me, I'll begin to live fulfilled, begin to live the dream, taking into account that I do things properly and with the right intent. Once I begin to practice, I'll begin to live the dream. You got to know who you are in order to not just take steps, but to take the proper steps, the productive steps, the ones that in the long run will bring fulfillment and the dream about. One bonus piece of information I'll give you is that actions in the right direction will also have a measure of grace provided in order for you to take them. The road will be easier when you're going in the right direction. Doesn't mean that you won't have a fight. Doesn't mean that people won't fight you externally on your journey, on your pathway. But it does mean that acquiring the skill necessary, and even at the point of practicing whatever it is that you do, putting it into practice, it will have a grace or an enablement in it that will allow you to not only do it easily, but to enjoy it while doing it. The best way I've probably heard someone else say it is to say that your gift, and this was Steve Harvey, he said that your gift is what you do the absolute best with the least amount of effort. That's your gift. It's what you're divinely enabled to do. I told you all of that just to get to the real subject matter for today, which is really the prerequisite for finding out, discovering, acknowledging, understanding who you are. And believe it or not, one of the most effective ways of that discovery, and I will say beyond any type of divine intervention, which let's not write that off because it does happen for many of us all the time, especially when the desire is there. The universe, life itself will send us what we need, who we need to point us in the right direction. And we need it a lot of times. Cuts back on wasted time. But again, outside of any type of divine intervention, taking action will be the quickest way to get yourself on the bed of discovery concerning who you are and therefore the right direction in which you should move in order to begin to manifest, live your dream. So the problem with taking those actionable steps in order to figure out who we are is that many of us have blockages or hindrances that don't allow taking those steps to be easy. And I would even dare to say it won't be easy necessarily for any of us. It's one of the scary things about life because so much of it involves stepping into the unknown. So truthfully, the reasons could be many for why taking those actionable steps becomes something that a lot of us avoid altogether, except for areas we're forced to. But I want to highlight what I feel like may be the top 2 reasons. One of them I mentioned earlier for a couple seconds, and that would be the fear of failure, which I'll place in the number 1 position. And the number 2 position, I'll say, is our need for approval. Let's talk about the fear of failure first, really quickly. It could manifest in a lot of different ways, and I'll discuss a few. It could look like you being in a rush and paralyzed from taking any action because of your inward desire to take the right action immediately, feeling as if you making the wrong move right now will make you a failure. And so it's not really your desire to not move at all. But again, the mind state eventually paralyzes you because you're afraid to make the wrong move. And sometimes that can come from just wanting to hurry up and make the right decision. Now, this really sometimes even has to do with financial situations. So your next move will even determine whether you can eat. And I don't necessarily mean have a sandwich, but I'm saying you need income pretty quickly. And so you're afraid to fail with your next step because you need it to survive. And so sometimes the rush can be formed from that. And that's a more serious matter. The fear of failure in that position will make you just settle for something rather than being willing to make the wrong moves in order to discover the right ones. You'll just settle for a wrong move that you're more sure about as far as its financial result or its ability to yield a profit. The fear of failure could also show up in the form of competition. And this is just when you don't want your peers and people that you would like to keep up with feel like you're failing. And therefore, there's a lack of movement, a paralyzation concerning your ability to take actionable steps towards discovering who you are. And again, you'll often just settle for making money some other type of way rather than to be fulfilled, because you want to make it look like you are fulfilled, you know it all concerning yourself, and that you're keeping up with the people around you who may sometimes either be actually living fulfilled or they're acting also, and you all are just competing with each other. But it can definitely show up in the form of competition. Thirdly, the fear of failure can show up in the form of embarrassment. And this will just look like, again, you being paralyzed from taking action because you don't want to be the one out of the family or the one out of your class who doesn't make it or who doesn't uphold the family name. And you're afraid of being an embarrassment. And so therefore you settle. You don't try to live fulfilled. It paralyzes you from taking the actionable steps needed in order to discover who you are so that you can live fulfilled. But it's out of a fear of embarrassing other people if you quote unquote fail. So here's why it's important for you to get rid of the fear of failure. It's going to take you failing in order to discover the right avenue. You cannot consider hitting a brick wall or going down the wrong path as an actual failure. You need to redefine what failure is. If you quit completely or if you settle for something less than the dream and you stay there, you literally give up. That's the only time you fail. Not when you take the wrong direction and need to make an adjustment or need to turn around and go in a different direction. You're going to have to redefine what it means so that you will not be afraid to do what others consider failure. But it's not truly failure unless you give up, unless you settle. And most people actually live in failure because they did give up, because they did settle. And so if you don't want to be one of those people, you have to learn to redefine failure for yourself. Starting a business and it closing due to you not having all the right tools or whatever the case may be, As long as it was on the pathway to your discovery does not make it a failure. We have to redefine that. And even if you want to call it a failure, it's not ultimate failure until you've given up on what it is you're supposed to do, on who it is you're meant to be in this world. There's no true failure unless you give up. I need you to take that so that you don't be afraid to mess up, which is what most people call failure. That's not failure. Not to me. It would behoove you. It would be great if you redefined it for yourself, that you begin to learn that what most people call failures are only lessons, and you need those lessons to get on the pathway to discovery. And that discovery won't lead you away from making mistakes, but it will take you into a life that is full of fulfillment. Let's cover the need for approval really quickly. What this looks like is the inability to follow your own pathway or do something that somebody else has not approved of, which is oftentimes necessary for you to discover who it is you are, what it is you're meant to be and do in this world. So the problem sometimes with growing up around people who are not fulfilled themselves is that even with a good heart, even with good intent, because they've settled, won't necessarily know how to tell you how to be fulfilled, and will often give advice from their lens and from their decisions that, again, not all the time, rarely, they'll teach you not to go in the direction that they did. And they'll say, I want better for you. But most of you will have to experience them trying to get you to do the same thing that they're doing, even though it's not fulfilling, but they're telling you out of their need to be safe. And they want to send you on a safe route, not necessarily a fulfilling one. So the inability to move without those type of people's approval will hinder you from discovery every single time. If you need somebody to co-sign you making a mistake so that you can discover who it is you are, 9 times out of 10, you won't get that. More than likely, that's just my experience. That's just my guess. Because again, when somebody has good intentions towards you, especially when it comes down to parental advice and things like that, they probably want you to be safe and not necessarily mess up. But oftentimes, if you need to get off of the beaten path and start to make your own way and live your dream, do what's in your heart, in your mind, in your vision, you will have to learn to do it without the approval of those who would not have done it themselves and who have not done it themselves, which will be a lot of people that you're surrounded by, depending on who you are and where you are. What this ultimately means is that you're going to have to give up some of your care of people's opinions about you that, in this case, are used to control you and stop you from taking any actionable steps that are going to lead to a fulfilling life. A lot of people are not going to co-sign you doing something that they would not do. And so even if they wouldn't be willing to make a lot of mistakes in order to get themselves to a life of fulfillment, etc., they're not going to co-sign you to do the same. And you're going to have to be okay with that. And also learn to not always see those type of people, whoever they are, whether family, friends, etc., as enemies, because they may have good intentions towards you. So you have to be empathetic with them and also, again, learn to not care so much about their approval and opinion of you should you take the pathway that's less traveled. And if it's necessary, it has to be something that you begin to develop the ability to not care and go for your dream. And let me go back really quickly to a statement I made before diving into my top 2 reasons of why I believe people do not take the actionable steps they need for discovery. Again, which then leads to productive action that will carry you into a fulfilled life and the manifestation of your dream. I said that outside of divine intervention, the quickest way to discover is to be willing to take actionable steps, again, that may lead to mistakes and more than likely will, but you need those mistakes in order to know the right way to go many times. But I want to make sure I plug this, that the truth of the matter is, don't expect the divine intervention to come as you just sit there. Don't expect life, God, to send you any answers while you sit and wait for them and avoid taking actionable steps that will get you into the discovery process. The truth of the matter is that your guidance will come along the way. You can think about it all day. You can try to conjure up anything you want to. The direction comes as you're walking. Even the divine intervention, life will send you, even the serendipity, even the things that happen miraculously along the way. They happen as you're moving. You'll get way more accomplished on the way than you will standing there trying to figure it out on your own without the action. Life will meet you on the pathway. The right person, the right thing comes to you as you're moving, not as you're standing still. And I just wanted to clarify that because it may be something that expedites the process for you, but you still need to move your feet in order to start the process. It does not come any other way. You're not going to get it standing there. You're going to get it along the way. Whether that's discovery by hitting a brick wall and then making the right turn by way, or along the way, you begin to see the right signs pointing you in the right direction. Either way, you'll get more moving than just standing still. Those actionable steps are unavoidable if you truly want to live a life full of fulfillment. And so I wanted to go back today and give you a little game on how to actually make productive movements. Again, we don't just want to take action. In order to be productive, we have to take action in the right direction, right? And that's exactly what I've also made a portion of my Start Fresh coaching program. I want to show you and give you insight on how exactly to do those things. What this is a personal one-to-one coaching opportunity with me. And what I'll do is walk you through literal actionable steps as we are on the call together that will get you moving in the right direction. I want to show you exactly the questions you need to ask, the direction you need to think in order to get yourself on a pathway to discovery and eventually into a life of fulfillment. I want you to be a part of it if you need it. It's called the Start Fresh program. It's at becomingalthatweare.com. There's plenty of information on the website about why one-to-one coaching or coaching in general is the perfect companion for you along your journey. I believe it's one of the best avenues for guided information that will get you where you need to go, even better than this podcast. But check out the website so that you can find that information and sign up if it's what you need. Sign up. Also, while you're there, definitely make sure you get A New Home, which was the first book I wrote. I call it the Bible of being yourself. Through the lens of my own life, it'll give you guided steps on how to fully be yourself in a world that often capitalizes on you being what it needs. And so you'll want to check that out. And I appreciate you for listening. Check out all of the podcasts. All of them have very good information, especially if you've enjoyed this one and want to continue in the process of you living your dream. Has good information for all ages. Check those out. You can contact me through social media if you want to. Leave a review here, especially if you enjoy it. But either way, you can leave one. Subscribe to the podcast so that you'll get them once they're uploaded every Sunday. Actually, before you go, I want to give you a little snippet of a new song I just put out called New Life. It should be available on most major platforms by the time you hear this. So go check it out. It's under my name, Brian Farr. It's my desire through this that your way be made prosperous. Here's New Life. And until next time.
The one's chosen. I'm stepping out of the grave. That's your omen. Yeah. Now a child. Inflorescent. Warrior. Feel my presence. Sagacity. Pressure. From dead broke. Woman affluent. Underdog. Made a past of it. On top of this shit. What's happening? Born in darkness. Came to life. Fit in the masses. Eternal life.
You give me new life.